Are you ready for liftoff? Don't miss Canada's #1 cannabis conference and trade show, Lift & Company Expo, coming this May 12th through the 15th to the Metro Toronto Convention Center. Level up your industry intel at the Lift Cannabis Business Conference. Plus, connect with movers and shakers from across the cannabis industry and preview new products and services from 250 plus exhibitors. Plus, everyone loves Lift & Company Expo's prizes, live music, and more. Visit liftexpo.ca for tickets. That's liftexpo.ca. This show has been brought to you in part by Bogart Extractors, an industry leader in hydrocarbon extraction. Bogart machines have been used in licensed extraction facilities all over the world and are available in small or large capacities for any scale operation. Call Bogart at 855-553-3887 or visit them at www.bogartbogart.com and get the right equipment for your lab today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Deadhead Cannabis Show. I'm Larry Mishkin of Mishkin Law in Chicago, and I am joined, as usual, by my co-host, Rob Hunt from San Diego. We get the best of Rob today. He's showing his true colors, a little under the weather, but from the bed in his house, he's joining us and going to participate. How you doing there, Rob?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I don't feel so hot, but I look forward to doing the show every week, so even if I'm under the weather, I'll get up from my nap in bed and try to make sure that I'm here to discuss Grateful Dead and cannabis policy.
It's always fun. Not worth sleeping through. I would agree with that. And we got some good stuff going on today. Some really interesting stories. We have acknowledged that we are now well within the 50th anniversary of Europe 72, which we are going to get to one of these weeks or maybe a couple of weeks, depending on how many of those shows we want to focus on. But the precursor to Europe 72 is an album that Bob Weir put out, and that album is called Ace. It was his first solo album. There's 8 songs on the album. 7 of them wound up in the Dead's regular repertoire, and we'll get to the one that didn't in a minute. As a quick introduction here, Dan, why don't you go ahead and spin the clip from our first tune from Bob Weir's Ace from 1972, 50 years old.
His praise was jingling, the door was ajar. His buckle was silver, his manner was bold. I asked him to come on in out of the cold. His brain was boiling, his reason was spent. And nothing is borrowed, nothing is lent. Mercy gave me a gun. Now and again, these things has got to be done. Abraham and Isaac sitting on a fence. Get right to work if you had any sense. You know the one thing we need is a left-hand monkey wrench.
Well, that's a very well-known introduction for anyone who saw the Dead in the well, really throughout, but certainly when I was first starting to see him in the early to mid-'80s, Greatest Story Ever Told was played quite a bit, usually right at the beginning of the show. Although I have to say, Rob, in all the years I saw it, I never heard it with Bobby ripping into a big roar like that, like he does on this album right before he gets started. So, although maybe that's just his way of celebrating since this is the first song on the disc, but either way, he's full-throated on that one.
Yeah, he is. And it's interesting to point out that originally the opening line of that song was Moses come riding up on a guitar. So it wasn't a quasar, and they shifted it, right before they actually put it on the album. So it's a controversy of whether or not they should have stuck with the original lyric. But, it's such a great way to kind of come into it. And more importantly, It's such a great way to announce like his solo album, but still being in many ways a Grateful Dead record because Keith's piano playing is so obvious, Don's background singing is so obvious. It's basically like another sort of the way Garcia did with his first album. That in many ways it's just a Grateful Dead album with the artist, the individual, sort of choosing who's going to play on which songs and who's not, without making it a true Grateful Dead record. But to your point, everything ended up in the canon but one song.
And what I like, I was reading, and Phil Lesch's comment was, well, we knew it was Bobby's project, but from time to time we'd all pop into the studio and say, hey, how's that one tune coming, Bobby? Oh boy, you need somebody to play bass for you on this one, or and eventually they would all go in there and do it. But yeah, it's great, and I really really love that album. It's a fun solo album. It's a great Bobby album, and we'll have fun talking about it in a little while. Hopefully with the same enthusiasm that Mr. Weir brings to the table. On the other hand, we have quite a bit of some interesting news stories, I think, to talk about today going on in the marijuana world. A lot of it has to do with, are we at a point where, and I don't mean this, we talked last week about what's going on with federal legislation and whether that's going to happen or not anytime soon. But when you see the what's happening in these articles and news stories we're going to be talking about, it's hard to not get the feeling that we're going in that direction, right? So the very first one is that in North Dakota, of all places, they have advocates pushing to get adult use on the November ballot and possibly get a vote on it. And they couldn't get it passed by committee within the state legislature, so they've gone the other route of just trying to go ahead and get it as a ballot measure up there. And there's a lot of talk going on about how many signatures they need, and of course you have to keep in mind, I guess, in North Dakota any number seems like a lot. And fighting the forces within, kind of like the way Kristi Noem just stomped herself all over the voters' approval of medical marijuana in South Dakota. But I love the fact that even in these states, and now with North Dakota, that there's groups of people who are not giving up and who are really pushing the cause. And I think it would be wonderful, again, to see a state, the citizens of the state approve it, and see if there's another governor who's, got the courage or the balls, if you will, to step in and stomp all over that program.
Yeah, I think that I think they will pass it. To your point, it's a very sparsely populated state. The ballot initiative gathering of signatures is probably the single hardest part about doing this. It's just finding where people congregate to get enough signatures in the first place. But if they get them, I'm pretty sure if this thing gets on the ballot, it's going to go through relatively easily. I can't think of an initiative at this point that's failing for once it actually gets on the ballot. Having said that, how meaningful is North Dakota joining the other states that have come in the mix? Only in so much as you can say it's another number, but in terms of does it move the needle politically, it's not really at all. But it is great for the people of that state, and it's great for the people of that state if they pass it to hopefully have access to adult use and hopefully not have to worry about incarceration anymore. So anytime I see that, I'm always very, very encouraged.
As am I, and while I would agree that it's just a celebration for people who like to smoke marijuana, I think it's always relevant in these types of matters, just to keep track, because I think sometimes people have to be reminded that we talk about this all the time, it not really being a political issue, and it's important to note the number of red states that are online and that are coming online. And even if you have a governor who, like in South Dakota, who tries to get in the way, I'm sure they're going to bring that again sooner than later. There's support for it in all these places. And what's really interesting is I think, if you look at this, maybe it's a little bit of a microcosm of who we really are as a people, right? On the ground, on the personal level, everybody, as far as we can tell, wants access to legal marijuana. And it's only, when you get up into the upper reaches of government where, politicians play political games with these matters that we really see. It at least for me really helps highlight the fact that what politicians tell us and how we vote for them and what they wind up doing aren't always the same thing. And because if they were, it would seem like, given the support, everybody would be passing it.
Yeah, look, that's a great segue into our next story, which is Virginia, where you'd expect that Youngkin would be the veto. I mean, I don't know if you saw the news yesterday, but 726 bills went in front of Youngkin for signature. He signed 700 of them. He vetoed 26. The 26 that he vetoed were the only 26 bills that were put forward to him by the Dems. So if you want to say, like, straight across, political party lines, Youngkin just wiped out every Democratic bill that was out there. Having said that, he just actually expanded the cannabis program in Virginia. I should at least say made it significantly easier to operate for patients, for companies. And I don't think anyone really, saw that coming. The Republican legislature of North Carolina, or excuse me, of Virginia, walked back a lot of what had been passed already. And you'd have expected that Youngkin would have supported his state house, but he didn't. He stepped out on a limb and actually, supported the 4 companies that have licenses in that state.
Well, absolutely. And when he was elected, when he first came in, he was on record as saying he didn't know if marijuana was going to be a good thing. But I'd like to think that he got into the state house there and he took a look at the landscape the way hopefully somebody in office would look at it. He's got unique insights and access to information that the rest of us don't have, certainly. And it must have made strong financial sense and everything else. And again, this is what's significant in this state is even as he's doing this, the Republicans in the General Assembly were blocking a potential passage of an adult use law. So, it's sometimes where they're on the same page on other issues, you don't even see political parties coming out on the same page on cannabis. And I think that's because a guy like Youngkin, you're right, really sees the advantages that it could have for a state like Virginia. And says, yeah, why not? Let's expand this medical. This makes sense, and I like his reasoning. Politically speaking, that's smart. You're never going to lose by playing to the sick people in the state who are looking for something to help them with their pain or improve their conditions. So, either way, it's nice to have.
Yeah, and just a great example of, once in a while you get shown the light.
Absolutely, and certainly that rings true in the strangest of places, right? And I guess you do have to kind of look at it right. But yes, that's a great point. But I guess really topping all of this off is this information that we get out of another story here that's nothing really new, other than to just reiterate the fact how many Americans really support legal cannabis in this country right now, and the fact that anybody still gets in the way. Now, I think that what was interesting is, and I'm almost sad that they kind of do this because I'm not really sure that it's necessary, but you have Democrats, 72% support it, 60% of independents support it, 46% of Republicans do not support it. We know the Republicans like to get high. Why is that the case? I can't tell you. What I can tell you is that I know people who I've long associated with who have come out as, Republican and pro-Trump who, when we're sitting around getting stoned doesn't really seem to matter to me, except that they'll say things like, yeah, this legalization of marijuana is not a good thing. Well, I can get it if I need it, but I don't know that we need the whole masses smoking it. There's a little bit of an elitist attitude there that really kind of bothers me, right? I mean, marijuana is what it is, and it's for everybody. And you can't sit here and say that that you appreciate it while denying somebody else's the right to appreciate it too.
That's exactly right. But again, there's plenty of times I think in politics on both sides where you see that attitude of it's good for me but not for you. But I do think that if you were to look at the true numbers and say, do you truly oppose this? Like, really oppose it? If you never used cannabis, would you want to be arrested for it? They'd be like, well, no, of course not. Like, yeah, I used it when I was young, and I'm glad I didn't go to jail for it, didn't lose my federal student loans for it, or didn't get kicked out of school for it, whatever the case may be. I think a vast majority of that 54% that oppose would probably back off that mark if you actually ask them 1 or 2 follow-up questions. I think it's just the headline number of like, are you for it? Like, no. Like, it's hard on drugs.
But, and this is again a great segue into our final story here, which I don't like to talk about this kind of stuff because this is the kind of stuff you get high and then you start freaking out about, right? And then when you see a story that actually talks about it, you're like, wow, is that was I right to be paranoid? And of course this is
you are freaking out, man.
Yeah, well, I guess so. That happens on the show, baby. Dark money prohibitionists. Are they out there? Are we just imagining that they're out there? And, are they really out to try and, do with money and, with their own set of, code words and, that kind of stuff to overcome the what seems to be the overwhelming majority of the people who want to have marijuana? And if so, who are these people, right? Are they people who are genuinely concerned about healthcare? Are they people who are objecting on religious or moral grounds, or are they people who have a financial interest, let's say like the alcohol industry? What do you know about so-called dark money prohibitionists, Rob? Have you heard about this, or were you aware that something like this is going on?
Yeah, I've definitely heard about it, and there's certainly closed door groups that create policy like ALEC that are out there that are trying to shape policy the way they want, and they certainly have deep pools of capital behind them. Now, having said that, there's also plenty of guys that have very deep pockets that are very overt about the fact that they're supporting prohibition. Whether Sheldon Adelson before he passed, he poured tons of money to keep cannabis illegal, and there's no shortage of other groups that have come right out and said, yeah, we're opposed to this. So, do they need to be, dark money? Do they need to hide in the shadows? Or are they, perfectly comfortable saying, we're not doing this, we don't want it, and we're going to put real capital into it? So, do I think it exists? Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely exists. The same way I think there's dark pools of capital that exist to fight anything that they don't want. But do I think it's necessary anymore? Do I think it's so politically unpopular that people are like, oh, the only way we're going to do this is by doing it behind the scenes because we fear the repercussions of taking this position? I think the guys that are anti-cannabis don't really care. I think their response is this is the path we're going down. Whether it's because they support another industry like the pharmaceutical industry or the alcohol industry, or whether it's they just believe that save the children. I've got no idea. Whatever or they know someone that got heavy into like real drugs and then said, okay, well they still believe cannabis is a gateway drug. Which, by the way, there's still a ton of people that think that. Like it still is out there that people believe this nonsense. But if they do, it's very, very difficult these days to change people's minds on anything. And, that rumor's been going around for, since the Reagan years, that cannabis is a gateway drug. You start with cannabis and you move on.
The Nixon years.
Yeah, exactly.
When we were kids, we were taught, if you smoke marijuana, you'll wind up doing hard drugs. And, that was just the natural thing. And I, it's very simple for me, right? When I talk to people about that, I just say, well, let's take your logic a step further. Then isn't really the true gateway drug to everything mother's breast milk, right? I mean, we all started on that and then we went to everything else. So,
or sugar.
Well, that too, or sugar.
Yeah.
Right. But
I mean, my kids would sell me out in a heartbeat for sugar.
Everybody's kids would, I mean, that even the kids that act like they wouldn't would. That's just, we know how that goes, right? But I mean, hey, if the logic is they smoked marijuana, then they started doing cocaine, well, they drank mother's breast milk, and then everything else after that followed that. So come on, guys.
But I mean, look, obviously that's the extreme example, right?
Yes.
I'll give a much more practical example and say that I know a lot of people that have done cocaine, and what I'll tell you is that almost every one of them, if you were to ask them, what did you do before doing cocaine? It's alcohol. They'd be like, well, I had a couple of drinks. A buddy of mine put out some rails. I was feeling a little loose. It wasn't like I smoked a joint and did blow. It was I was drinking and someone brought out a plate of blow, right? I think that's true of a lot of other drugs. Like I think that your inhibitions, decrease in a significant way. And I think if you were to say, what is the gateway drug? I say it all the time. I'll repeat it on the show. People laugh about it when I say it. Almost every really dumb thing I've done in my life has started with booze. Almost every one of them. Like every dumb mistake I make where I go, oh, how did I end up in that stupid position? Guess what? Drinking is what started it. And it's not this, and I'm a huge advocate for alcohol. I love booze. So I'm not here to tell you that like I gave it up because I made bad life decisions. I'm just going to tell you that every dumb thing I've done, through my youth all the way through my 20s and 30s, if you were to pinpoint, where did it start? It's probably scotch or beer. It's not cannabis. Like I've done very few dumb things. Normally, like the worst thing I was doing was going home and taking a nap that turned into waking up in the morning. So it's like this whole gateway idea. I have like never in my life did I ever smoke a joint and then try a hard drug for my first time. I definitely tried harder drugs after drinking, like while drinking, like 100%, probably all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, my impression of cocaine always was that it went with alcohol and champagne and, people who were like living, and probably that's because these guys I knew at Michigan would have these cocaine parties where, you'd have to pay money to get in, and then they'd have little champagne fountains and everything that was all set up, and it just always seemed a little too over the top and unnecessary for me. If I wanted to get high, you could just light a joint, you were fine without having to go through all the rigmarole and everything, Oh,
it's such an exclusive drug, isn't it? It's like you get the wink or the nod and, like who's in that bedroom, who's in that bathroom. It's, it's very, very different. It's not, social the way, smoking a joint is, or even, breaking out a bottle of wine or a 6-pack of beer. It's very much either you're in the club and you get the look or you're not. Now, having said that, there was a period of time where I tell you that cocaine went with everything. So it wasn't just a champagne, but I look at that as that it's a drug where I know a lot of people that had a lot of issues with it. I've known a lot of people that didn't. So for the reason of how many people I know that did have issues with it, I take a much more jaundiced view. Like if you said let's legalize blow, I would say yes, just to do it from a social justice perspective, and say yes because I'd rather people have safe access to drugs and still have the ability to seek rehabilitation and not be criminalized for whatever decisions they make. But if you were to say from a safety perspective, like, do I think that everyone should do cocaine? Definitely
No,
not.
right.
It's certainly not for
No,
everyone.
I would agree with that, and I do agree. I'm generally, libertarian when it comes to that, and think that, that all drugs should be treated not as a law enforcement issue, but as a public health issue. And people who need treatment, want treatment, should be able to get that treatment. And, if somebody wants to be able to do a line of cocaine, God bless, but you know what? They should be able to do it without freaking out that it might have fentanyl in it. And
You know what I love though, Larry? Like this is something that like in the time we've been in the industry, in the cannabis industry, here's something that I can tell you has been a massive change for me. Every conversation I used to have in like 2012, 13, 14 with people that didn't know anything about the cannabis industry, once you started talking about cannabis, inevitably somewhere in that conversation would lead to cocaine or heroin. Someone like, it would always like incrementally go to another drug. That never happens to me anymore. Like when you talk to people about the cannabis industry, it's never like, oh well, don't you think it can? Like for the most part, that issue's been disposed of because of socialization of cannabis, where it's really nice. I don't have to go, oh God, here we go again. Here's the heroin conversation. Like, no, we are talking about cannabis. We're not talking about heroin. We're not talking about MDMA. We're not talking about fentanyl. We're talking about weed. If you want to have this conversation, like intellectually honest conversation, when you talk to me about alcohol, I don't immediately jump to like someone's like, oh, my buddy works at a brewery. I don't go, oh, did that lead to heroin?
that's
It's just
true.
it used to be an absurd sort of crossing the chasm leap that you would get.
Right. I mean, caffeine, anything. I mean, all these other substances that are so addictive and cause so much more problems to humans than cannabis. But yeah, look, we're just preaching to the choir here. It's good to be said, and it's good to hear it, and it's absolutely true. And again, I think you need nothing more than to see that when you have a majority of Americans who support this, and whatever the percentage of Republicans is, and the ones who say they don't support it are lying, just like the ones who say I don't want it in my community because I don't want my kids to smoke it. Bullshit. Your kids are smoking it, and
I had the conversation today in California, Larry, with someone who was talking about delivery services and talking about certain towns in Los Angeles, Manhattan Beach in particular, where Manhattan Beach knows it's in their community and just goes, yeah, we just made the decision we'd rather have delivery services and not have retail storefronts. Like we know it's there, we're cool with it. We just don't want someone to be able to walk into a shop in our town, and that's like the greatest hypocrisy. Like your voters passed it overwhelmingly. You already know it's there, and now you're concentrating in the hands of the delivery services rather than the hands of like someone that might be a local that would stand to benefit to hire other locals. It's the weirdest thing to me.
well, I completely agree with that too. And to me, that marijuana retail should always be about the dispensary experience. I have no problem with the home delivery service complementing that. And, when I've been out in California and my friend says, oh, we don't have to go anywhere. Here, I'll make a quick phone call. And all of a sudden they show up and it's like ordering a pizza. And you're like, wow, this is pretty cool. But right, you have to have dispensaries and you have to keep them viable because that's where people, nobody tries marijuana for the first time by picking up a phone and calling for home delivery. I mean, nowadays, because we have dispensaries, you're going to have a lot of people whose first marijuana experience will be through a dispensary. And you know what? That's good. Go in, talk to people in the dispensary if you want. Know that whatever you're getting is safe to try, and then go home and try it. If it works for you, fantastic. If not, not. But you don't have to go home and start to feel bad and say, oh my God, did I maybe smoke something that's been laced with something? Because you bought it from a dispensary. It's not laced with anything.
Yeah, I'm watching the retail experience. I mean, I hear it all the time from like the larger retailers that they keep trying to say like no one's gotten retail and cannabis right yet. There's still so much that we have to work on. I can tell you that when I walk into a lot of these dispensaries, I'm consistently impressed by the level of just how clean the store is, how nice the store is, the variety at the store. Like it's a really nice retail shopping experience, much better than they give themselves credit for. Like maybe you might find a more efficient way to replenish, maybe find a more efficient way to feature products. I know in like Michigan, for instance, you still can't even go in there and ask to see what's actually in the jar. Which is a bit ridiculous.
Right.
But in California, you certainly can.
Neither can we.
You should be able to.
Yeah.
You can't in Illinois either, huh? You can't even see it.
You can display it, but if you're a dispensary owner and you want to display it, you have to tear open a sealed package. You have to then display it where you can't bring it down. I can't open it, smell it, anything at all like that. And then, of course, once it's been displayed, since they've opened it, it has to be disposed of. It can no longer be sold or
So
anything.
most groups won't do it
So
because every
most people just say, screw that, and they have their iPads, and you can see.
Yeah, that's weird to me. I mean, like,
here's what it looks like on an iPad. And you're like, okay,
right.
cool.
But is it what it looks like inside that jar or inside that box? Like, I personally, when it comes to flower, there's something about bag appeal. There's something about, looking, feeling, tasting, smelling, like you want to be able to say, oh, that's what I'm buying. Like, yeah, I want that. It's sort of like picking your lobster out of the tank.
Well, it is. And if you think about it, I mean, look, back in the day, we were all just so damn happy to find anybody who would sell to us. You'd give him the money and he would just hand you a bag. That was it. Here you go, dude. This is what you're getting. And we didn't know any better. So we were like, okay, fine. But now you can actually go someplace and you have a wide variety and you can try indicas and sativas. And we all know, about all of this now. It really does make for a great experience. And I agree, some dispensaries have really, really come a long way to the point where I typically avoid them. But when I go into one of them, I like it because you've got people there who are enthused, who come right up to you. Can I help you? Who, I can ask questions to. And they answer them, and I never want to come in and say like, "Hi, I'm a marijuana guy. I have a podcast," because I just want to hear what they have to say. I'm curious what their opinions are on everything. Nobody has to impress me, and I'm not out to impress anybody. If they don't know what they're talking about, it becomes obvious pretty quickly.
Yeah, I usually walk in and go, "Don't you guys know who I am?" And immediately start, sort of like flexing on all the bud tenders, being like, "Dude, look me up." Like, now imagine that though.
Well, there are probably people that do that.
Oh, there may be. I mean, that's a silly thing, though. I can't imagine seeing a musician walking in and saying, "Have you heard my music?" Do you have any like favorite dispensaries in Illinois? Anyone you want to give a shout out to of saying like these guys I think are just doing things right?
Sure, I really like Curaleaf. They started out as Greenhouse. Well, they didn't start as Greenhouse. They purchased Greenhouse in a really impressive deal for all parties concerned. And now it's called Curaleaf, and I do frequent them. Well, it keeps changing in Illinois. I'm a medical patient. I have a medical card. My medical card is through the Curaleaf dispensary that's near my office. And it used to be you had to go to that one. Once the pandemic kicked in and everything else got crazy, they relaxed that rule. And now, theoretically, you can go to any other. So Zenleaf is also right down the street from me. That's a lot closer to my house in downtown Evanston. It used to be MedMen at one point, but now it's Zenleaf, and I think they do a really nice job there too. And the folks there are always very friendly. They get you in and out really quickly. So to my friends at Curaleaf and Zenleaf, hey to you guys, and listen to our podcast, and I'll give you a shout out the next time I come in to say hello. So there you go. But they do it right. The experience there is right. But I think I was talking about maybe this last week or the week before. I love when I go to the normal legal conference the weekend after Memorial Day, or with the times when I would always be going, and I fly into Denver, and I rent a car, and I drive out there, and you can either take the route where you go over the pass, which is beautiful and really scenic and really nice, and a lot of curvy, windy roads if you're into that kind of thing, or you can take Highway 70, which is beautiful but pretty much just highway. But when you get off Highway 70, it's about 20 or 30 miles to Aspen. And you drive through all these little towns, and every little town has its own 2 or 3 little small dispensaries. And those you walk into, and they still do have it in the jars, and you can look at it, and they'll pick it out with the little, chopsticks for you, or whatever they call it. You can see it, and they won't let you touch it or necessarily, but you can smell it. It's great stuff. You want some? Oh, here, well, 1, 2, 3, 4. Can I have that bud there? Sure, we'll give you that bud. Well, that's fun.
That's my old hood, right? I used to own a hydro store right in the Aspen Valley, outside of Glenwood Springs, right by Carbondale. So all those places you're talking about were all my customers. They helped build a lot of those grows. So there's a lot of good growers in that valley. A lot of good growers a little further down 70 towards Rifle and Parachute, where they actually were zoned properly to do those to do the cultivations. But the Aspen Valley is for years. I mean, go back to the Hunter S. Thompson times, and go back to the Eagles singing about just like smuggling out a Telluride, right? That's that part of southwestern Colorado was like super well known for not only like being sort of the importers of a lot of weed, but also like a great cannabis cultivation tradition, which brought us like strains like the P-Bud, which ultimately I think became the OG Kush. I think P-Bud was brought out to Florida and then brought back to California. So if you look at the lineage of some of these things, that part of Colorado, like in the in it's the Frying Pan River, or I can't remember what you call the valley in Aspen, is very, very well known for producing some of the best weed in the world for years and years.
Excellent. Excellent. At Maverick Public Relations, growing your influence is our specialty. MPR works with remarkable companies in the cannabis industry to deliver exceptional results. Experience big agency expertise and outstanding client service delivered by seasoned and knowledgeable experts. Connect with Maverick PR today and move your company to the next level. Visit us today at www.themaverickpr.com. Wow. Okay. Well, all this talk about marijuana has got me really wanting some music side. And the first thing we have to point out, joining the ever-growing list of celebrity-endorsed brands, is the estate of George Harrison.
Yeah, I don't get this one.
I don't either.
I really don't.
Mm-mm.
And then first of all, I love Danny Harrison. I'm a huge fan. I think I'm sure the whole Harrison family is lovely. I was a huge fan of George. A huge fan of his music, a huge fan of his guitar playing, legend, right? But do I think his name resonates as someone that, like if you were to say George Harrison started a yoga brand, that I would get. If you were to say like he's got an Eastern philosophy book that is, sort of holds true to his mantras, that I would get. But for the Harrison family to put out a cannabis brand, yeah, sure. I mean, George definitely smoked weed, and that was clear. But was he advocating for cannabis the way some of the other guys that have celebrity brands out there, the way like, a Willie does, or a Burner does, or a Wiz Khalifa does? Those guys, it makes sense that they go, hey, I put my liberty on the line to support cannabis. Seth Rogen, Snoop, those guys all did it. Like they said, like, with Cheech, Chong, their entire like personality or sort of like what they built themselves up as had a serious marijuana bent. Dave Chappelle, those guys, like if they have brands, I get it. I'm 100% behind it. But when it's someone that's like looking to cash in because they think that like they have a name that's recognizable and someone's trying to make cold bucks on the marketing, no disrespect to George, I'm just not feeling that one.
Well, and I think, and I could be wrong, but my impression of the Beatles always was that while, they had kind of a 60s style to them, that it was more pronounced through their embrace of psychedelics. And psychedelics, while they never came right out and said, hey, man, we're all tripping on LSD, they certainly put out music that, if you knew what it was, you knew, and album covers that if you knew what it was, right? And all of that kind of stuff. So that part was, just very politely celebrated. But I think there was a conscious effort to kind of like keep quiet on their marijuana use, because I don't think marijuana was really fully accepted at that time. And if you wanted to go on Ed Sullivan's show, that may not be so much. So, but you're right. I mean, there was never a point. I mean, later. I mean, certainly John Lennon, in fact, was very big. In coming to Ann Arbor, Michigan, when John Sinclair was arrested for 2 joints and sentenced to like life in jail. He was arrested in Ann Arbor, sentenced to life in jail in Michigan, and John Lennon came with Yoko for a big concert they were having at Chrysler Arena, the basketball arena, with a couple of other acts, but certainly Lennon was the biggest name by far and gave it tons of credibility. And the end result was that Sinclair eventually got out of jail after only a few years. And more importantly, that helped launch the Ann Arbor Hash Bash, which has been an ongoing tradition now, always over April Fool's weekend up there.
Yeah, that's coming up again, or just happened.
Well,
huh?
it just happened, right? And
Yeah.
Had some friends who were up there, who go up there every year. It's really just an amazing experience. You have to see it to believe it, where they go and they take over an entire hotel, and for one weekend, smoke up. The hotel says go for it. In fact, they kind of, it's almost jokingly say, we'd prefer you not smoke in the guest rooms because it's harder for us to clean those up. But you walk in and it's like walking into a concert. I mean, the entire place is filled with smoke. And the manager always says by 9 o'clock at night on Sunday, they kick you out by noon on Sunday. He says, by 9 o'clock at night, we're ready to open again. We've got the smell out. We've got these big industrial fans. I'm like, you know what? I take one hit in my room. 6 months later, one of my kids comes upstairs and says, "Dad, did you party in your room?" And it's like, but they can clean out this hotel of all the smell in 5 hours, 6 hours, whatever. But God bless them. It's quite an experience. And they have the ballroom set up, which is just a big shopping mall. And everybody from Michigan and other places drives in with their stuff, and you can walk through, buy whatever you want, and sit out in the lobby. They have live music. John Sinclair has been there in past years. Other famous people. It's quite an experience. It's a lot of fun. So,
Yeah, I've still never been. I've been to a couple of the other big ones. I've been to the Freedom Rally in Boston multiple times. I've been to like the Smokeouts in Golden Gate Park. So, but the Ann Arbor Hash Bash has always been one that I think at some point would like to check out. And obviously, tons of High Times Cannabis cups. But it's amazing. It's amazing the guys that did it.
well, let's mark it down. And we'll get the three of us out there. You, me, and Dan. We'll go do a live remote from Hash Bash in Ann Arbor. That could be the call. But April 1st, 2023, guys, be ready to roll.
Well, that's I think you need to convince my wife first, but if you can get her on board, then
it's business. It's business. Look, you have to travel on business. You have to travel. If it's Ann Arbor for Hash Bash, it is what it is. What can I tell you?
Yeah.
So 50 years ago, young Bob-Ace Weir comes out with his first solo album, which we have said was basically a Grateful Dead album, but the songs were all basically written by him. And he got the guys in the band to come in and play with him. What do you know about this nickname Ace?
I know that, I always commonly think of Bobby as the kid, like when I think about what his nicknames were. But I also know that, like when I was younger, it was always referred to as Bobby Ace Weir. So I think he kind of kept both nicknames. Where that nickname came from, that's one of those questions that we've had a couple of guests on recently that I'm sure would absolutely know, where it came from. But I think Dan pointed out to us that it was engraved on the fret of one of his guitars, and certainly there's a fair amount of legend you can pull up about the fact that he was considered called himself Ace, and that it was in many ways sort of a self-titled nickname for the album, essentially calling his album after himself. But that's all I really know. But I'd love to know more about it.
Yeah, it is kind of fun, and I think it kind of fit his personality at the time. Anybody who ever saw Bob in the '80s, doing "Not Fade Away" and standing on that front of that stage, and "My Love Is Bigger Than a Cadillac," and screaming and yelling and hooting and hollering, and that's always the way he was, and his energy, really helped fuel the crowd. And whereas Jerry was we all love Jerry, but if Jerry raised an eyebrow, the crowd kind of went crazy. Bobby was never stopped moving in some respects,
Right.
and
Yeah, you had the Throwing Stones Jam and the Sugar Mag Jam, where he always came to the front of the stage and did the same little number.
the whoops and the hollers, and that's why I love that first song, "The Greatest Story Ever Told," that we started off with, because he's got that same little scream that he just lets loose with, and sure, he's celebrating, and that's a great tune. Like I say, that was the Greatest Story was, most of the years I went, that was typically in the show opener, a Bertha Greatest Story or a Half Step Greatest Story or something like that. But inevitably you'd see it there. And it was a lot of fun, and it's big on Europe 72. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's the very first song they opened with the very first night in London at Wembley Pool. They come out and they open with Greatest Story, and Europe 72 was like a sounding board for this entire album.
Yeah, and then in the 80s, you could be pretty sure that if they were opening with Touch, you'd probably get a Greatest Story afterwards. Or if they open with the Greatest Story, oftentimes you get a Sugaree afterwards. So, there was, some pretty decent combinations, not like an Estimated Eyes or a Scarlet Fire, but, it was definitely paired up with some other songs that kind of just try to keep the enthusiasm going coming out of the gate.
And, well, that's true. And this is a tune on which, whatever your feelings about Donna might be, typically, on this song, her vocals add to the tune and, really kind of help supplement Bobby a little bit. And I enjoy that.
Yeah, and there's so many other great songs on this. And the other thing I think it's worth pointing out is, most of the songs were written by Weir and Barlow, but, Hunter definitely helped out on a couple of them, like playing in the band he was certainly a part of. So it's a question of which ones. And I think the other thing that's interesting is I can't think of any songs off of a Garcia album that ended up making it onto a Grateful Dead album later, whereas Mexicali Blues ended up on Skeletons from the Closet.
Right.
So,
exactly.
they really did eventually claim it as a Grateful Dead song instead of as a Bobby tune.
Right, and well, I mean, I guess like a lot of them were on Reckoning and stuff like that too. But yeah, on official stuff that they put out. But absolutely, and I think that
Right, like studio
yeah,
tracks.
I think you're right. I think that for all intents and purposes, they did become Grateful Dead tunes. So even more important, to really shout out to Bobby, for getting these tunes out there. Now, the second clip we have for today, what I really like about this entire album is I was trying to pick the clips I wanted to listen to. Some of these songs have just tremendous, tremendous lyrics, and I know that's Barlow. Some of it is Hunter. Black Throated Wind to me is just full of some of my all-time favorite Grateful Dead lyrics, and we just can't, without playing the whole song. There's no way to touch on all of them. But everything like plunging like stones from a slingshot on Mars, and all of that kind of stuff is just. I mean, these are really deep, descriptive lyrics that when you hear it, even if you're stoned and you're listening to it, you have to stop and think about that for a minute. What did he just say?
Did you like the original, or did you like the when they came back and changed all the lyrics after 1990? Were you more of a fan of the rewrite, or were you more of a fan of the original?
I think I'm more a fan of the original. I mean, look, I was just happy he was playing it, and that we were able to, able to hear it. But I mean, there's a lot of those songs, like what a Saint of Circumstance has its, Tonight I Crossed the Line, Last Station on the Line. It always seemed like on a lot of his tunes, he was trying to work them out as he went along, and when he wasn't obviously screwing around like on Truckin', and ever since she went and had her sex changed, which to me was always a crime, because living on Reds, vitamin C, and cocaine is just such a perfect line for that song. It's such a descriptive lyrical line, but Black Throated Wind is just full of them. So here, Dan, go ahead and play, please, the clip we have from that.
Now what's to be found from racing around? You carry your pain wherever you go, full of the blues and trying to lose. You ain't gonna learn what you don't wanna know. So I give you my eyes and all of their lives. Please help them to love as well as to see, and capture a glance, oh, and make it dance. Looking at you, looking at me. The black-throated wind keeps on pouring in with its words of a lie that could almost be true.
I forgot that's a hometown song for you, Larry.
Oh yeah, he's
That's
got
a St. Louis song.
Well, that was another one of those lyrics that I love. I love St. Louis, City of the Blues, but ultimately I went with this last part because I love the music. I love the horns. I love how all of that mixes in so well, and I just love that lyrical line about capture a glance, make it a dance, looking at you, looking at me. It's just like anybody who ever thought they were getting the hots for a girl and sit there looking at her, but don't want them to look at you. And, he just captures that moment. I love that part of that song.
Well, it's a great lost love song.
Yep.
It's there's a couple. I mean, obviously looks like Rain has a fair amount of lost love on this album as well.
Yep.
But between the two, I'd take Black Throated like 99 times out of 100.
Yeah, no, I love that song, and like I say, I was just happy when they brought it back. And yeah, it would always be fun to have it as it was original, but no loss for me. It's nice because it gave Bobby, kind of like another slow tune to play. And we're not going to feature Looks Like Rain today, although we easily could because it's so great. But the thing about Looks Like Rain that I think was important for Bobby was it gave him that first set ballad. Jerry had tons of first set ballads, Candyman and Loser and whole bunches of them, and
Sugary, Althea.
Right, and now Bobby had, Looks Like Rain, and I mean, he, for a while he played it a lot. It was getting played almost every concert, every other concert. On Europe 72, it shows up in almost every concert. On the album, Jerry plays pedal steel, and the second night of Europe 72 in London, they played it, and Jerry played pedal steel. And apparently it was the only time on the entire tour that he played the pedal steel, but they had him play pedal steel for Looks Like Rain. I think it's April 8th, 72, the second night in London. And just with all those great musicians and instruments, it's just, it's really fun. But now we have to move on to this song we've been teasing, which is Bob Weir comes out with an album, 8 tunes. 7 of them make it into the regular Grateful Dead playlist. Yeah, Black Throated Wind was dropped for a while and had to come back. But every single one of these other ones, Greatest Story, Playing in the Band, Looks Like Rain, Mexicali, One More Saturday Night, Cassidy, those songs never dropped out of the rotation of Grateful Dead songs. And it's just amazing. So everybody says, well, what about the 8th song? Why didn't the 8th song make it on there? Go ahead and play it, Dan, for a minute, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Look out, 'cause here comes some free advice. Walk in the sunshine. Watch for the bright side. Be all those things you're able to be. You got to listen to the heavens. You got to try and understand the greatness of their movement is just as small as it is grand. Try not to hurry. It's just not your worry. Leave it to those all caught up in time.
It's got a nice beat to it. I don't know how I would have felt, in 1985 if all of a sudden they dipped into it in the first set, but probably, would have enjoyed it. And again, it's just that unbridled enthusiasm, right? Look out, because here comes some free advice. I love that.
It's a great bar piano song, and it's got some great lyrics. And I've always been a big fan of You Got a Deep Six your wristwatch.
Yep.
But I was always surprised they didn't play that one, or at least didn't break it out a couple of times. Just to once in a while, just put it back in the rotation. But I can think of a lot of songs that that I would prefer that they not play, and if they slip that one into the rotation, I'd be perfectly happy with it. Especially as like a mellow first set Bobby tune.
For sure. And I'm not aware of it ever having been played by the Grateful Dead. However, we did find a clip that we're not going to play right now, but on the show notes, you'll be able to find the link to the clip. They just did, Bob and Wolf Brothers and those guys at Radio City Music Hall, a 50th anniversary celebration of Ace. And he brought out this woman who's just a wonderful singer, and I'm sorry I can't remember her name, to sing this song with him. But what's really funny is he's got about a 3-minute introductory rap, as only Bobby can do, where he kind of lays out with this, we needed a song to fill out the album, and we only had another day or two in the recording studio, and Barlow was working hard, and we were trying to get something done, and he gave this to me, and we said we'd kind of make it work. And Barlow's version of it is, I gave him the first set of the lyrics and he hated it, so I gave him this, and I thought these were worse than the first set just to pimp him. But Bobby made something out of it and threw it on the album. But he does tell that story very well. So you go to the show notes and find the link, and you can check that out. But I thought it sounded really good when they played it, 50 years later, and certainly this woman's vocals helped him out tremendously. But he picked right up with it and played it like he played it yesterday. So good for him.
What's always surprised me about this album is that, obviously it's a big decision where to slot your songs, but you'd think that One More Saturday Night would be the final song of the second side, instead of putting Cassidy in that slot. So it just makes sense to me to say, okay, let's finish with a bang. And I always thought, Saturday Night was kind of that. But on the other side, I wonder how much influence Barlow had, because, I had a chance to ask him personally about 20 years ago, of all the songs you've written, which one are you most proud of? And without skipping a beat, just Cassidy, just instantaneously Cassidy. So I don't know if Barlow was like, hey man, that's the one I want, finishing this thing up.
And that could be, we're going to talk about Cassidy in a minute, and spoiler alert, that's going to be the clip we're going to play on our way out today, because any of these tunes are great. But, to me, in the canon of Bob Weir musical accomplishments, Cassidy certainly has to be right up there, right near the top in terms of both the melody and the lyrics and the story that he tells, and we'll get into that in a minute again. But One More Saturday Night is I love that song in the same way that I like Sample in a Jar from Fish, right? It's like just a rock and roll tune. They just pick it up, they just jam through it. There's not a lot of exterior jamming to it or anything like that. It's just a peppy little number, and Bobby, clearly liked it. And after hearing him scream and screech on that song, it's a miracle that he didn't blow out his voice years ago. We would always wonder how he could get away with it at the end when that One More Saturday Night, right?
Yell.
Hey, another Saturday night, dun 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 dun. Hey, right? Yeah, just like whoa. But now, what's interesting, at least for us, is we only heard it on Saturday nights. But if you saw a Saturday night show, you knew you were going to get it.
It was guaranteed, just like Samson on a Sunday.
Yep, reckon it's this being a Sunday. But so on the one hand, right, that could kind of be a little bit of a killjoy if they get to the end of the show and you're like, oh, well, they haven't played it, so we all know the encore is going to be One More Saturday Night. And what was always fun on those rare occasions, once we heard him close the show with it, which was like, ooh, now what will they play for the encore? And then one night we went in on a Saturday night, he actually opened with it. And to me, that's always part of the fun of the Grateful Dead anyway. But I appreciated the song a lot more when I wasn't associating with it, okay, it's time to go home. When you're like, oh, good, we can jam on this and we still have a little bit left to go. And on Europe 72, he plays in almost every single show. So at that point in time, it clearly was not limited to only being played on Saturday nights, which might have driven the Europeans crazy. Who knows?
But you know how much less material they had at that time. It was like half the songs in their canon weren't written yet. So it's you're recycling stuff a lot faster.
Absolutely. And the truth is, I really do believe that Europe 72 was, their time to really, as a band, work all of these tunes out. I mean, some of them show up earlier than that playing in the band. They were playing live back in 71 for a while, certainly. And most of these others, I think, they weren't playing until at or around the time the album came out. But in the Europe 72, liner notes and in all the stuff, one of the songs that they consistently talk about is playing in the band, and how if you listen to it at the very first show of the tour versus the version they play the very last show of the tour, you can really see how after basically playing it 18, 19 times out of 20 shows, they had really developed it and worked it into the framework that, we more or less all, very clearly recognize today.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because, obviously for me, I only got to see a handful of songs, maybe 25, 30 songs get developed from the time that when they broke them out for the first time. For me, getting to see So Many Roads, I saw the first one ever played and then saw the next 12 or 13 in a row that were played, and just watching the progression of that song and how it improved. And again, speaking to lyric changes, how many times Garcia was still fiddling around with the lyrics and still not really, all the way until the end, he hadn't decided what the lyrics of So Many were. But, that's true of that song. It was certainly true of Days Between. It was certainly true of a handful of others where you actually really got to see them develop from, when they were first played. But that, when I saw it, you might get it every fifth night. It wasn't, there was never a situation where they were playing it over and over. Whereas with Fish, going back to Fish, in 1990, 91, 92, I can almost tell you, every second show they were going to play Antelope. It used to be every night they switched off between You Enjoy Myself and Mike's song for the trampoline, right? You knew every night you were going to get one or the other. Kind of like when you went to see Garcia Band, you knew it was going to be a deal or let's spend the night together to close the first set, right? So it's completely different when you see a band that's playing the same songs, even if it's in different order, than when you actually have a band that's got a big enough canon that I don't have to repeat for 5, 6, 7 shows. And that's, when I started seeing the Grateful Dead, they were already clearly at that point that, I might not see a song again for 20 shows if it's one that they were pulling out once in a while.
Right. Which was both fascinating about them and what, compelled us all to go back because you just never knew, but at the same time maddening, right? Rob Bleetstein, it's hard to believe that there was only one Morning Dew in all of 1978. We complain about, they play Black Peter or Wharf Rat and I wanted my Dew. But if you went on tour with the Dead, you were going to get a Dew in the 80s, every fourth or fifth night, probably pretty regularly, and really up through the end.
Yeah, cheers to that.
But that's just the way they are. And sometimes, a song falls out of the repertoire for a while, and then boom, one night, there you are, and Phil Lesh steps up, and you think he's singing Tom Thumb Blues, and the next thing you know, it's Box of Rain. And you're like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, I mean, like, Standing on the Moon eluded me for like 30 straight shows. I couldn't, like, I'd either be the night after or the night before, but I missed a Standing so many times to the point where I was like, am I ever going to catch a Standing? It was infuriating. But, again, it makes it that much better when you get them.
Yeah. High Time was my song. I didn't see High Time till like my 80th show. Every time I would, oh, they just played it the night before. Oh, they just played it the night after you left. My buddies would joke about it. They're like, oh, yeah, if you want to see High Time, Michigan's not going to be there on Friday night. Go home. And he's going home. They're going to play it. And then, son of a bitch, oh, yeah, they played High Time, man. It was awesome. So finally, for my buddy Alex, we were in Las Vegas for his bachelor party in 1992. And the second or the third night, I don't remember which one it was, in the second set, somewhere along the way, I was with my buddy. We're all hanging out. And one guy yells, where's Michigan? Where's Michigan? They're playing High Time. And all of a sudden, there it was. I was like, okay. Then I saw him, a month later in Chicago, boom, High Time.
Play it again.
Yeah, then I caught it like four times in 5 shows or whatever. But
I got one relatively early. 3:28.90, I think, was my first High Time at the Nassau Coliseum. That legendary run that included the Brantford night the next night.
Yep.
But the first set of the 3:28 was a High Time.
That was great. But I never caught a Casey Jones. I was telling Bleachstein that last week. He couldn't believe it. I'm like,
I can't believe it.
In the 80s, it just didn't get played very much. And even in the 90s, I mean, maybe once a year, twice a year, maybe. And, they seem to have a liking to do it. I know they did it at Merriweather Post once in the 80s. And I think they did it at RFK once in the 80s. But yeah, in 84, I was like on, almost the entire tour. And whatever show I missed, they played it that night. I never heard Casey Jones live until the Terrapin family reunion in 2002 at Alpine Valley. The first night, they closed the first set with Casey Jones. And I was like, oh my God, here's Casey Jones.
That's funny. Yeah, I was a little upset that I missed the breakout at RFK when they did the big train whistle noises and stuff. But, I saw Vegas where they did the same thing, where you actually, heard, Mickey pulling the air horn for all the fanfare. But yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of other songs that I got to see breakouts of. I wasn't super bummed I missed the breakout of Casey Jones. I was much happier that I got to see like the breakout of Here Comes Sunshine.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Here Comes Sunshine was great. When they finally got it around, brought it to Chicago, we were all just, it's like, they're going to play it. They're going to play it. They have to play it. Of course they're going to play it. Lights go out. Boom. Doom, doo, doo, doo. We're like, yes. And that was the best part about the Dead, right? I mean, that was what, 92 or 93?
I think that's right. I think it was December of 92 when they brought back out in Tempe, Arizona.
So, right at that point, 90, I'd been seeing them for over 10 years. And it's great to be able to see a band for over 10 years and go one night. And there, I remember when they broke out Loose Lucy. I wasn't at the breakout, but I was there a few nights later on that tour in Kansas City.
3/14/90.
In fact, the whole group of us, we went to Kansas City just because we were hoping we'd catch a Loose Lucy, and we caught it. So, that's to tell people that's what you had to do. If you wanted to catch a tune, you had to be willing to stay an extra night, drive an extra 100 miles, go to one more show.
Skip class.
Skip class. No, Dad, really, I'm going to graduate. I promise. Don't worry.
Lie to your parents.
Absolutely.
Whatever it took.
Which was just fine until once when my one of my father's brother-in-laws passed away, and we were out in Colorado at Red Rocks, and I called to check in on the folks. Just, hey, how's everybody? Oh, good. Well, your uncle passed away up in Chicago there. So we assume you'll just drive down from Ann Arbor and meet us there for the funeral. And I'm like, well, about that, I'm kind of out here in Morrison, Colorado. So, but I'll be home soon. Give my best to my aunt and my cousins, and
that goes over like a lead balloon with family.
Yeah, very much so. Let me tell you, very, very much so.
So let's finish this up with some Cassidy action. Again, probably one of my two favorite songs. Definitely one of my two favorite Bobby songs in the first set. And definitely one of the jams I'd always look forward to. That and Jack Straw, I think, were my two favorites in the first set for Bobby.
And what I love about Cassidy is, of course, everybody would argue who's Cassidy. And now, the official story is that it was Rex Jackson and Eileen Law's daughter, Cassidy. but he drops references in there to Neil, right? Lost Now in the Country Miles in his Cadillac, and he definitely makes references to Neil Cassidy in there. So, but all of those are so great. And in fact, I'll give a shout out to a good friend of the show, Bob Hoban, who named his daughter Cassidy for this song. And I have friends that have done that. And if you're going to name your kid for a Grateful Dead song, this is a good one to do it. And I think probably goes over a lot better than August West. So,
yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah. But this is a great tune, and it was always very much fun to hear in concert. Typically a first set song, just beautiful and really a great way, I think, to duck out today. So another good show, Rob. You made it. I'm impressed that scratchy throat and all. That's true Deadhead spirit. Like, no, Mom, really, I'm good enough to go to the show tonight. I'm gonna go. I'm going to the show. Honey, you're so sick. No, I'll be fine.
Lots of vitamin C, lots of water. I can power it out. I'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's amazing what, however many mics of acid will get you up and moving really, really quick, no matter what's going through your system.
Well, what I'll tell you is that my wife always teases me saying that guys always pretend they're sick. I think she even has like a tea towel that says, I thought I was dying, but it was just a headache, with like a picture of a guy like this on it. It's the classic like lack of threshold for pain. But I can tell you, like, for me, if I know I've got to work and I've got a huge schedule, I'd rather just shut it down, get the sleep I need, and get ready to get back in the game.
Amen, brother.
This is it for me today. So I'm going back to the solitude of my bedroom. But thank you for spending an hour plus with me today, and thanks out there everyone in the audience. And hopefully I'll be rested and revived by the time I come back next week.
Beautiful. And next week we have a guest, Lynette Shaw from the Marin Alliance for Medical Marijuana. So that should be very, very interesting.
I'm so stoked about that. I mean, Lynette is as OG as they come. Like the war stories we're going to get from Lynette, from being there like day one, like Dennis Prone days of changing laws in '96 and everything it took to get there. There's like her and Valerie Carell, I think, are the two people I hold out there as like the absolute warriors of the early days of the cannabis industry on of the females in Northern California. So I am super stoked to have Lynette on the show.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great, and I look forward to having a chance to talk with her and hear her stories. And look, we're nothing if we're not supporting the women-owned businesses in cannabis and opportunities for women in this industry, and they have to be a part of it. And in fact, it's not even a question of have. People like Lynette are probably they're probably the ones deciding whether some men belong in the industry.
I agree. I mean, like I such a huge debt of gratitude to Lynette for everything that she did for all of us. So I mean, I am just so fired up that there's certain people that made this industry, shaped this industry, that really kicked it off the ground. But for some of those people, and there's a handful, and we've had luckily we've had a few of them on the show. But it is such an honor when you get someone that put their liberty on the line and changed the world, like truly changed the world.
Yep. I absolutely agree. One other thing that I'm just going to throw in here that kind of sounds mundane and next to that, and something that you and I did not talk about today, and we're going to talk about next week, I'm making a point of that, is this whole little kerfuffle last week when the announcement came out that Dead & Company was done at the end of 2022, only to have it retracted almost immediately. And of course, it's right at the same time that they're releasing their summer tour dates. And so we're going to hold off.
I think Mickey had tweeted out, or Billy tweeted out, news to me.
No, Bobby did. Bobby said news to me, and then Billy tweeted out, "Oh, good, I'm glad. I didn't want to be the only one who hadn't heard," or something like that. But that's all interesting stuff. So we will talk about that next week and about their upcoming tour. But they have announced a summer tour, Dead & Company, for people who were wondering. So be prepared to enjoy that.
And so is Phil. Phil keeps dropping dates.
All over the place.
We're getting lots of Grateful Dead music coming up this year with original band members. So on top of everything else that's happening,
Phil Lesh is doing.
There's a great little festival that was just out here in LA last week as well. That was all Grateful Dead. That a lot of bands. DSO was there. David Gans was there. So it's the celebration of the Grateful Dead's music. I mean, there's still full festivals dedicated to nothing but playing Grateful Dead music.
This year we have
I'm excited for 2022.
This year we have the new Sacred Rose Festival in Chicago. Brand new, never happened before. We're going to be out at the soccer stadium at the end of August. Phil Lesh and Friends headliner the first night. So it's just going to be a great week, and we're looking forward to that too.
Let's do this. Let's get healthy and get back and start seeing some music.
Amen, brother. So Rob, thank you as always.
All right, man. See you next week.
You got it. Feel better. To all of our other listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us. And now, as we let you go, please enjoy Cassidy from Ace, which is 50 years old this week. And we hope that you will enjoy it. Be safe, have fun, and enjoy your cannabis responsibly. Thank you, everyone.
Now on the country miles in his Cadillac, I can tell by the way he smiles, he's rolling back. Come wash the nighttime clean. Come grow the scorched ground green. Blow the horn, tap the tambourine. Close the gap of the dark years in between. You and me, Cassidy. Quick beats in an icy heart. A catch roll goes a coffin pot. There he goes, now here she stops. Hear her cry. Light up the seabed. Scattered like lost web. Wheeled in the storm and light.
Hi, I'm Gary, and I invite you to discover the Cannabis Podcast, a bi-weekly podcast focused on a Canadian's cannabis culture. I would be the Canadian, and my cannabis passion and culture has been building for 5 decades. I share that passion for this wonderful plant in every episode, through conversations with cannabis advocates and enthusiasts, stories about the ever-changing legal environment, and some hands-on testing of product in a segment I call Cultivar Corner. The Cannabis Podcast, a Canadian's cannabis culture, one toke at a time.